Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Hagan, and this is Next In Sales, a next level podcast. I am so stoked to introduce you guys to our guest today. I am here with Chris Elliott, the CRO of BizLibrary. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. How's it going?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. Can't complain. I would love if you could give our viewers just a little bit of background on yourself before we dive into the questions.
Yep, absolutely. As you mentioned, Chris Elliott, CRO, currently at BizLibrary. We are the leader in all things learning and development. So we're out to create a more compassionate, competent future for our customers and their learners. Career in SaaS, B2B SaaS. So primarily within the HCM, human capital management space. I've been very fortunate to be part of just some fantastic organizations and experience kind of leading those organizations to growth to exit on multiple occasions. And I've been part of a startup where we just crashed and burned as well. And so that was certainly a lot of lessons learned there, but a lot of success along the way. So excited to be joining you on the show here today.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, when I was kind of reaching out to you at the very beginning, it looks like, you've helped build some really amazing teams. So I'm super excited to have you here today. First kind of question that I want to start off with is, obviously with the amount of wealth of experience you have in sales, I'm sure, as you mentioned, you've learned a lot of lessons. What is one thing that you wish that you would have known at the beginning of your sales career? And when and how did you end up learning that lesson in your career?
Sure. One of the biggest turning points for me in terms of how I would engage with customers and go on to really instill in the organizations that I've gotten to lead is just being absolutely obsessed with making your customers wildly successful. And I think so often, particularly if you're new into sales, there's so much emphasis on product knowledge, industry knowledge, competitive intel, core diffs, all of the things that are part of your traditional one-on-one kind of sales boot camp, if you will. And I think what gets lost in all of that are those are things you do to somebody, not for somebody. And it's not just me being altruistic. I believe this to my core that if you'll put your emphasis on how can I go make the person across the table or on the other side of the Zoom and their organization as absolutely, how can I ensure their success through a partnership, that the revenue will come. And when it does come, it will be good revenue. You'll land customers that are aligned to your organization's value prop, that are not purchasing because of a feature or functionality, but they're fundamentally buying because they believe in what you do and how you do it. And so, I think for all of those reasons, it's something that should get talked about a lot more often and earlier into the sales journey is, how can we go out to really drive value for our clients? And of course, in the process, we're going to do things like provide demos and talk about core diffs and all of those elements, but really rooted in, hey, I'm trying to do this because I want you to come out better on the other side of the partnership. And if I can't get you there, that's okay too. Let's go find somebody else where we can go create that value.
Right. No, I love that because if you think about it and you follow sales all the way to the end, you can see that the way that you provide value is by driving value for your customer. And so I think that that's a really unique way to, take on that perspective that maybe people aren't necessarily teaching right off the bat.
Yep. Absolutely agree.
Awesome. So I know when we first got together and started talking about doing this podcast, a lot of the focus that we were kind of talking about was discussing in hiring, since that's kind of my wheelhouse, and you've built a lot of amazing teams. So do you think that quality hiring in sales is becoming more or less difficult?
Definitely more difficult, by far. And I think there's a couple key factors at play. I think the nature of the sales role itself is changing quite quickly. The same role today, I would think for most of your viewers, is a different skill set requirement than probably even 2 or 3 years ago. So I think
Yeah.
the skills that are needed themselves are changing, and I think there's more of them. Fundamentally, buyers are engaging with sellers live at a different place in the evaluation journey, and their expectations of what that engagement looks like is different. And so AEs just need a different skill set than they had to possess 2-3 years ago, certainly pre-pandemic. And I
Right.
think not only is it different, it's also just more in terms of what we need them to be able to do to successfully take that prospect who's now ready to engage live and really usher them through an engagement all the way to close one. It's not easier, it's harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of mentioned it, especially with the pandemic, the onset of remote work environment. I can only imagine that it has made it more difficult to compete.
In terms of sourcing talent,
Yes.
yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think
Right.
certainly it's easier in the context that your pool of available talent is dramatically bigger, right? I'm no longer confined to the, depending on the tolerance for commuting, a 30 to 60-minute radius. I've got, the whole world is my oyster when it comes to candidate availability.
Right.
But the other sharp side of that blade is, how on earth do I scour through this population of candidates to find the few that may actually be a great fit for my role? I think that dynamic is one that is very new to most organizations. It just working with the sheer volume of candidates that you're going to receive to find the few that are going to be a great fit, not only culturally, but also possess the skills that you need and be able to go and execute on that in a total potentially remote environment. Those are kind of all new dynamics to not only the hiring, but onboarding and ultimate kind of success of that candidate within the organization.
Right. And when you think about it, I mean, that kind of goes both ways, because not only do you have a wealth of people to choose from or to go and source, but people also have so many more options of where they want to work. And so I think when you take both of those things into consideration, it can make hiring a lot more difficult.
Yes, and I also think that's another reason why just kind of the increasing expectations of employees to their employers. It's no longer just about your product and your comp plan. And I think kind
Yeah.
of your mission, your culture, and not just culture in terms of, hey, we have some awesome slogans on our website, but truly, how do you engage and support your employees in all aspects of their life, both professionally and personally, has become forefront for many of the candidates that we're engaging with.
Absolutely. And what do you think some of the biggest pain points that you are seeing as a hiring manager are when it comes to, again, like quality hiring in your sales organization?
I think, some of the stumbling points that I'll see first is just not updating your criteria quickly enough. Because again, I think for most organizations out there, if you look at who do you need today, it's probably a slightly different answer than 12, 24, 36 months ago. And
Yeah.
have you really taken a pause to start to inventory what that redefined skill set is like? Because I think too often we're going into interviews with just the wrong rubric. Even if we did it a
Yeah.
year ago, it may not be current with what you need today. The other one that I don't think it's new, I just think it is accentuated in a remote environment, is proper qualification. Even if you nailed the rubric of exactly who you're looking for, it gets really difficult to separate phenomenal interviewers from candidates who can really go perform in the role. I think that's not to say that a
Yeah.
great interviewer isn't also a great salesperson, but I think the key is, are they going to be a great salesperson in your environment with the circumstances that are going to be required for them to succeed in your role, and making sure that your not only your criteria, but your interview process really can parse out those skills and ability of that candidate to go and execute like you're going to expect them to.
Absolutely. I think that every sales organization is so different. and every salesperson is so different. And what works for one salesperson at one company is probably not going to work for them at the next, or it might, but you just never know. And it's really hard to qualify that just based off of a resume or an initial conversation.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. From where leads are sourced to the nature of the sales cycle in terms of length, number of stakeholders,
Yes,
technical expectations, like the list goes on and on and on. All sales are not created equal, and making sure that you really, one, know what that looks like at your organization, and then can translate that to the interview process for the conversations that you're having with your candidates.
absolutely. And so, kind of going back to my wheelhouse, I know that you've used agencies
Mhm.
before. When do you think that it makes the most sense to take on a partnership with an agency for your hiring?
Uh, so I listened to your other episodes, and I agree with the answers that were shared previously. So I'll throw a new one out there.
All right.
I think one additional reason that you should definitely consider looking with a partner is based on your internal pipeline capabilities. So I have been at organizations that there was no path to go from
Hmm.
SDR or more entry level roles to a quota carrying salesperson because of who we sold to. They were Fortune 1000 type focus, where they're not entry level sales jobs. They're going to be
Right.
candidates who typically have 10, 12 years plus, that kind of being on the minimum side. So if at your organization, if you don't have a clear talent pool that you can path internally from, an entry level role to some sort of junior quota carrying role, kind of fully into your sales organization, you likely are going to tap relatively quickly the capabilities of your internal team. And I'd say if you don't have that internal pathing as one of your levers for staffing, I think I would go look for a partner so that you're not
Yeah.
exclusively dependent on internal recruiting to go staff a sales organization if you really have no pathing internally.
Yeah. I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's something that we see all the time, actually. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Well, to kind of go and segue away from the hiring, you know, I've talked to a lot of salespeople. I've been in recruiting for about 2 years now. And far and away, a lot of them have said that the hardest part about being in sales is learning how to push through rejection. And obviously, that's something that every sales leader has had to learn how to overcome. What would be your advice to those who might be struggling with that or who are just kind of starting out?
Can I share an anecdote on this one?
Of course, absolutely.
Um, so on this topic, I found a story that never what I thought would lead to a parallel to the sales world. But one of my favorite books is Born Standing Up by Steve Martin, and he's talking about rejection in this book, and he tells a story of his first ever girlfriend. So young Steve Martin has his first girlfriend, and he gets dumped. And so, as you can
Steve
imagine,
Martin.
Steve is down on himself. He's at whatever job he's got as a teenager, and his manager notices that he's down. So he asked what's going on, and Steve tells him the story. I had my first girlfriend, I got dumped, and without missing a beat, his manager just said, "Oh, that's going to happen a lot." And that was the light bulb moment of like, I guess this is just the way it's going to be. And he kind of goes on to say, from
Yeah,
that moment forward, rejection just never really got to him because it was that moment of this is something that's going to happen frequently. And so, in that same vein, what I'd share with you if you're in sales is it hurts if it's unexpected. You should know if you're getting into the game of sales, you're entering into a very weird profession where you're going to lose more than you win at most sales organizations. If you're in a B2B environment, chances are you have more losses on the board than wins. And so
absolutely.
I tell you to embrace it. No is not a bad thing at all in our line of work. And for that matter, oftentimes no's come back in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, and go on to become yeses. I'd say the classic thing about no's is you want to get there as quickly as you can if it's going to be a no. Don't obsess over it. I'd say what you should obsess over is if you get to a no and the no was a do nothing and you spend a ton of time on it, I might do a little soul searching on what did we miss from a qualification perspective, because at the end of the day, they didn't have budget or the urgency wasn't there to make the investment. The other one I might lose, one night sleep over, is if you got a no and they went with a competitor. So a purchase was made, it just wasn't you. That's the one that eats me up the most, because we qualified from an urgency perspective. They did something, but somebody else took my lunch money, and that doesn't sit well with me at all. So those are the ones I would probably scrutinize the most. Did we miss on the qualification of, we should have known early on we couldn't go make this person wildly successful, that there's somebody out there in the market who can do it, faster, more accurately, or no, all day long we should have won that business, but we didn't. We missed in sales execution. So that's about the only no that really gets under my skin is when we lose the competition when we really should have won. But all the other forms of no's that go to just kind of lost momentum, I wouldn't sweat those. I just make sure that you're getting there as quickly as you can, providing them with a great experience, because chances are they're going to come back at some point. I'd say it's the first of a longer process out there in the market. So don't sweat the no's. It's going to happen a lot.
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite sayings is rejection is just redirection. It's not anything to do necessarily with you. I mean, it might be, maybe you did something, you messed it up, but most of the time rejection is just going to be saying either not right now, or this isn't the right pathway.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So, you've been in sales leadership for a long time, Chris, and I know that you've seen a lot of people move into sales leadership. What's the most common mistake that you've seen people make when moving into a sales leadership position for the very first time?
Oftentimes the people move into leadership because it seems like the natural progression of things. Hey, I'm a top performing contributor. I'm number one on the team, or consistently at the top of the leaderboard. What's next for me? What must be that manager spot? And I would say if that's kind of the end of the thought process, like that's the number one mistake, because typically in most sales organizations, the notoriety from a top individual contributor to a top manager, it's not even close. The notoriety and the accolades for a top contributor is 10x what a manager is going to receive. And same financially, typically a top performing account executive that's blowing out her quota is going to out earn a manager that's at or just above plan in most organizations. So if you're getting into it for the fame or the financials, especially for that first managerial role, you're getting into it for the wrong reasons. You should get into a leadership track because you truly love the art and the craft of professional selling and investing and instilling that in others, because you love seeing customers just be wildly successful at your organization, and you want to go spread the good news gospel of your organization to as many people as you can. Those are all great reasons to make that transition. But if you're a top performing seller and fame and notoriety and financials get you out of bed, stay at it. I think there's a false kind of pressure or perception that it's not successful to stay as an individual contributor for a career. And I think that's a big disservice to really great individual contributors. That's a fantastic career. And so if you don't have that calling to really teach and lead others internally, I wouldn't feel the pressure to make that career hop from left to right, because I think you can be a lifelong individual contributor and just provide tremendous value to the organization and continue to meet whatever financial goals that you may have.
Well, because let me ask you this. How many times have you seen a top performer move into a leadership position and within maybe 2 years they move back into an IC role?
All the time. You see it all the time. And let us listen to the show today. Let us save you the heartache. If you just don't wake up every morning, I can't wait to go do a team training. It may not be the right path. It's if you're extremely financially motivated and you're not willing to make a long-term investment, because again, if you're at the top of the leaderboards today, it might be 3, 4, 5 years on the managerial track to get back to I'm at 120, 130% of quota consistently as an individual contributor. It's a longer term investment. So if you're willing to sign up for the commitment that, hey, I really want to stick this out a long term, go for it all day long. But I think that's probably the number one mistake, is just getting into it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm going to kind of throw you a little bit of a curveball question here that
Okay.
I didn't actually send over earlier. But what do you think is maybe like the number one non-negotiable trait that you have seen that all sales leaders need to have, or all of maybe the successful sales leaders that you've seen have?
I think the number one, if I had to pick one, just non-negotiable, if you're going to be successful, you have to be comfortable delivering bad news. That's the
It's a
not
good
so
one.
fun part of leadership, is you always have to optimize your decisions for what is best for your business and your team. And fundamentally, what is best for the business at some point is going to disenfranchise an individual that reports to you, and that's never fun. It's
Yeah.
never fun when you have to not make somebody's day, right? When you have to give them bad news. And I think the pitfall is you try to become the extremely accommodating manager that always finds a solution for everybody. But the truth is that it just doesn't scale, and you can't do that every time, and you can't remain fair and objective. And so you've got to be comfortable kind of transcending the I'm your friend or I'm your peer to,
Yeah.
I'm here as your leader, which means I'm always going to prioritize making the best decision for all team members. And not everybody wants to sign up for that. And so I'd say
Yeah.
that's the one that you've got to make sure you're comfortable playing that role. And if you're comfortable playing that role, there's a good chance you can really succeed as a leader.
Yeah, and I think that really plays into the ability to like have real transparency and honesty with your team members. There was a hiring manager that I worked with last year. His name's Wade Billings, and he said something to me that like completely changed the outlook that I had on my professional life and on my personal life, and that is being clear is being kind. The best way that you can treat your team members is to just be honest with them about how they're doing, where they're at, and how they can improve. Because if you don't, you're doing them and yourself and your team a disservice.
Yep. No, absolutely. Very much kind of aligned to the radical candor sort of concept that you're not doing any favors if you're not giving them the truth and what you're really thinking. And so that's, just part of the development cycle.
Well, Chris, I loved having you on today. Do you have any last advice that you would like to share with our viewers before we wrap up?
Hey, final thing I would throw out there that I feel like has been a tremendous help for me throughout my career is consume as much content as you can. From shows just like this one to books to Audible, you name it. There are so many channels out there to get great information. And so if I was going to give one piece of advice, and I think this really goes beyond sales, really in any sort of career development role, is just invest in yourself and make time to learn and consume great content. It's easy to get caught up scrolling in content that's not productive. And I try to be really intentional about, putting content in front of me that helps me grow both personally and professionally. So I tell your viewers to keep listening to this channel and other channels like it that can, kind of grow their minds, expand their horizons, and hopefully there's just one or two nuggets that resonate with you, and you can incorporate it into whatever it is that you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. I really enjoyed having you on today. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this is Nxt In Sales, a next level podcast. If you like what Chris and I had to say today, I would encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share this with anyone and everyone who might enjoy. And I will see you next week.